track rate's very, very overrated.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Strike Rate, the Cricket Analytics podcast for our 9th episode. I'm Jack Hope. I'm joined by Dan Weston, who's been on the job today down in Kent. We're both pretty tired. We've been watching the IPL all day, doing podcasts, etc. But we're going to keep going. This week on the podcast, we're going to be talking about Chennai Super Kings and answering the question, why do they win so much? Dan, how are you doing before we get to the big topic? Are you going to be able to hang with me for another 40 minutes or so here and get out some good content?
I'm going to have to. I'm absolutely shattered. I was up early doors this morning getting to Canterbury. We played a first day of a 3-day warm-up game against Loughborough Uni, which was a good exercise, I think, for the guys today, and hopefully will be for the next couple of days if the weather holds. And it's actually the first time I've been to a cricket ground since I had heart surgery, so it's pretty nice to get back and get among the players and the coaches and just be back in that environment again. It was really pleasant.
Awesome. Yeah, good to hear that. That's really positive news. In part one, we're going to be talking through the factors that we came up with. And then in part two, we've got quite a few questions in from listeners to get through. So many that I'm not sure we'll actually be able to get to them all, but we'll try our best, you know. If you do want to ask us a question on a future show, make sure you're following me at JackHope0 or Dan at SA Advantage on Twitter. We post up a day before or a couple of days before we record and, you know, open source some ideas. And actually, Dan, this is a topic that was suggested to us. This is, I think, our first listener suggested topic. AD on Twitter asked a couple of times for us to do a little bit of a deep dive on Chennai Super Kings and kind of answer the question about, you know, what they're doing well. So similarly, if you've not got a question and you've just got a topic you want us to go into, let us know. And also, obviously, make sure you like and subscribe to Strike Rate on whatever platform you're on, or go across different platforms. You know, everyone wants to be an all format player, don't they, Dan? And yeah, our listeners and viewers can be. You know, go to Apple, go to Spotify, go to Acast, go to YouTube, like and subscribe on all of them, and help us grow our audience. Dan, let's get straight into it. Chennai Super Kings, why do they win so much? I mean, I'm going to ask you the really broad question, and I've got a few ideas myself where we can get into the detail a little bit. But you know, we're years into the IPL now. I think we're in the 16th season. Chennai perennial playoff contenders. I think that, you know, they barely ever miss out, and they've won a boatload of trophies, obviously including last year's IPL.
Yeah, so actually, Chennai have played, not including the current ongoing season, they've played 14 seasons.
They were naughty.
they've only not qualified to the knockouts 4 times. That was 2016 and 2017, where they were suspended, and in 2020 and 2022. I think both years that there was a clear reason as to why they didn't qualify. So 2020 was the COVID year. Pretty sure that the tournament was played away from. They didn't have any home games, which I will go on and talk about. Is the real crux of their dominance in the IPL. And then in 2022 they had the kind of disaster where MS Dhoni lost the gave the captaincy to Jadeja, and it didn't work out, and they had a poor year, come 9th. So there's always been kind of circumstances which are explainable as to why they haven't qualified, and also 5 titles and an incredible 65% win rate in knockout matches and 75% win rate actually in playoff matches is really quite an achievement. And either they've been very lucky in knockout matches, or they're the very rare kind of phenomenon where a team performs better in pressure moments. And that's not something that I really believe in that much, but at the moment they're showing that.
Right, so that's I think a really good overview. And when I was doing the research for this podcast, I could come up with sort of 4 main reasons why I think Chennai win. First of all, MS Dhoni. Second, Chennai strategically in terms of how they put together their team. Third, the Chepauk Stadium and the fact that they get to play, you know, obviously in years where we see home and away, and that isn't every year in the IPL, they get to play at a ground that has a clear bias and they can build a team around that. And then fourth, and you touched on it a little bit in their knockout stats, the impact of luck. And I think all of these things are quite interesting, and I think they all contribute, if you like, to this CSK myth that is rolling through the IPL up the top of the table again this year. Where would you like to start, Dan? I'll give you the kind of choose your own adventure. I've got those 4 topics and I've got some questions and stuff like that. So where would you like to start?
I think we're going to start with the biggest personality of CSK, and that's MS Dhoni. There's few domestic Indian players who are of a bigger stature than MS Dhoni. Possibly even no domestic players who are a bigger stature than MS Dhoni. And despite that, he's only been top run scorer for CSK once in his entire career over the season. He's earning his money primarily, in my view, through leadership. And the reason why I wanted to start with him is because I've spoken to players about him a lot, trying to find out a little bit more about what he does and what sets him apart from other captains. And they all just say he's got it all in his head. And I know that's probably a bit like what they say in the media too, but the players are saying that. I don't think he's a massive believer in data, and certainly probably from what I've been told doesn't do an abundance of pre-match prep from that side of things. But he's a bit like a chess player who seems to be 5 moves ahead of his opponent a lot of the time as a captain. I've been very strong on the fact that I don't think there are that many good captains in T20 cricket. So if you take 100% of all the captains, I would say probably 10% are really good, 10% are really bad, and probably 80% are roughly plus or minus 0 in terms of value added. And he's definitely in the 10% at the top for sure. Probably in the top 1 percentile of the top 10%, probably as well. So I think that he's been a massive factor as to their 5 IPL titles and 2 Champions League titles as well.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Obviously, on a podcast called the Cricket Analytics Podcast, the first thing we point to here is somebody that many people have witnessed eschew analytics in terms of how he goes about his decision making, and this is one of those times where you probably have to hold your hands up a little bit and say that sometimes you will find people that do just have an intuitive sense for how the game works, and their experience or their gut or whatever it is that's steering them and their decision making process. That analytics isn't going to contribute to that in a way that they would find to be beneficial, and I think that's okay. I mean, I did a couple of years ago after his first retirement. I had a look at the stats for all the bowlers that have bowled under Dhoni and under other captains in the IPL, isolating the data to just look at away performances to take the checkbook out of the equation. And over 20 overs, bowlers that bowled for Dhoni went for between 1 and 4 runs less on average than when they bowled for other captains. Now, there are some other things that factor into that. There's obviously the development of T20 cricket over X number of years. There's the age that people might have played for Dhoni, and then the age they might have played for other captains, and you might want to go into that data if you wanted to model in a little bit more detail. And it's also quite hard to do this for other captains because there just isn't the amount of data. Dhoni was a captain in the IPL for so long that we actually have the sample size to do this kind of research. But I thought that we might not be able to isolate exactly what it is that he's doing, but if it is making 1 to 4 runs difference, and I think my ultimate conclusion was it was about 3.4 runs. If you want no, so that's over the full 20 overs. So that's all of the bowlers added up over their full 20 overs. Yeah. So it's not a run and over. It's a small amount. It's like one. It's less than 1 run per 4 overs per bowler, if that makes sense. But that's still quite a lot of runs. And you take that over a season, say it's 3 runs, let's just round it up there, and you play 14 matches. That comes out at 42 runs, which probably equates to something like a win or half a win. And so if you are just looking at captaincy, whatever it is he's doing seems to be having quite an astonishing impact on the guys that he's playing for. And I think bigger picture, when we talk about T20 cricket or cricket in general, we count from 0 usually. We don't count from average. And maybe we should count from average a little bit more, because then we would realise that sort of 3 runs difference is quite a lot. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, Dan. I know you read the article, although it was a couple of years ago now.
Yeah, I mean, like 3 runs per 20 overs is actually pretty huge in terms of a marginal gain. There aren't many things that you can tweak in a team to have that immediate impact. So that's a huge benefit to CSK. Like you say, it's probably adds up to maybe a win or around that type of figure over the season. But in a league where at the moment only 4 teams qualify from 10, and you probably need at least an 8-6 record to qualify, and things are very tight in terms of qualification, that's actually pretty huge. Even just
absolutely.
1 win or 1.5 wins is massive.
I had another thing just on Dhoni, and then we'll move on to just general strategy. I think the fact that he's a wicketkeeper and one of the Indian players, like a domestic Indian batter, who at periods in his career at least, we actually saw it today. We're recording this after we went banzo on Amrik Norkia in the IPL. But earlier in his career, I'm really talking about, he was a hitter as well, and there aren't that many Indian batters who can hit. And there are even fewer who can hit and can wicket keep. And there are even fewer who can hit and wicket keep and are maybe the best wicket keeper in the league. And we don't necessarily quantify the value of wicket keeping that well. Or you might. There's not that much public knowledge about how important it is. And I think the fact that him as an individual combined these 3 very rare things and did them all really well, plus the captaincy, probably means that CSK have an inbuilt advantage just from the talent that he brings too, right?
Yeah. And that's where you look at a rare skill set, and not just the rare skill set in terms of, as you say, being a hitter who's a domestic keeper who's a captain. I mean, like, there hasn't been many of them over the whole of the IPL since it started in 2008. Yeah, that's it. He's a domestic captain, and we're already seeing with the other teams this year in the IPL, we've seen it many times in the past, is that overseas captains are often a really big disadvantage to IPL teams, because they are very dependent on the form of the overseas captain. The overseas captain is really difficult to drop even when they're playing really badly, and it can make a massive impact on your overseas combos when you can only pick 4 overseas players out of the starting 11.
Yeah, for sure. So that's Dhoni. I mean, like, Dhoni's obviously a part of this. The second thing that I had down was Chennai's strategy. Now, there are some things here that most people know about now, and I don't know if they're as important as we talk in 2024 versus in 2008 through to 2018, the first decade of the IPL. But if you look back, historically, Chennai Super Kings invested massively in Indian players when other franchises didn't do that. And you can look at the number of Indian players that played for Chennai that had 50 India caps, and it's more than they had on. It's more than other franchises were bringing to the table. That they went heavy on the domestic talent. There are a couple of other things involved in that too, from a strategy point of view. In that they and this is like a Chennai Super Kings cliche at this point, but they very rarely change their team. They make half a change fewer per game versus other teams in the IPL. So they're sticking with guys for longer, sort of regardless of things like form. And yeah, whether that's because they've analysed that player is a better player and they're going to stick with them and not worry about things like form, or whether sticking with the player means that they have confidence and therefore are more likely to come back into form, doesn't really matter either way, I don't think. But it's sort of been proven at this point I think, at least in the case of Chennai Super Kings, that it has been an effective strategy. So there's a couple of things I threw in there, like one, big investment in Indian players, and two, an investment in stability. I feel like they're obvious now, but in a sense, we could maybe give them credit, Dan, for inventing some of these ideas in T20 cricket.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I'm a big believer in kind of stability of rosters, whether that's both in the kind of recruitment retention environment, but also in terms of the not dropping players when they have one or two bad games. And I think even now, best part of 17 seasons into the IPL, we're still seeing that IPL teams do that a lot, and having a team with success who's averaging about half a change less per match than their rival teams shows you the value of stability and backing players and giving them the opportunity to succeed, but also not making knee-jerk changes if they fail in the right way, which is going to happen because that's the nature of T20 cricket. It's a very volatile format. And I think that probably one of the best examples of this was 2018 when they won the title. And I think Shane Watson hadn't had the best season for CSK and then ended up with an unbeaten 100 in the final. So, that was a really good example of them backing their player and getting the rewards from that.
Yeah, and I think that's we've seen that in other ways as well. If you look at the number of players that have played for Chennai, excluding the expansion teams and the sort of one season wonders and that we've seen across history, Chennai have played way fewer players than everyone else. Like, I think they either did just go past 100 players ever for the franchise, or still just under 100 players ever for the franchise. Every other team had passed that mark in 2019, like years ago, and that. This was probably one of those things that's actually slightly hard to quantify in a way, but that not only does that show backing in your players, but it also helps with things like building a culture and defining roles. And one of the things you'll hear that people who play for Chennai Super Kings might say things about Dhoni not really being that into analytics or whatever, but you'll also hear that all of the players know exactly what their job is. And one of the benefits of stability is that culture, and it is that role definition. And Dan, we probably talk about role clarity on this podcast 5 times a show. You don't see a better example of it, I think, historically in the IPL anyway, than Chennai Super Kings.
Yeah, so I just think that it's really difficult. Actually, it's something that we talk about a lot when it comes to team building and the impact that you need to have quickly in a short format competition is to build like a team culture very, very quickly, and it's extremely difficult to do that when you only have the players for a short amount of time every year. And so for what you don't want to do is you got a load of new players in and they've all got to integrate, and by the time you've integrated them all, you've lost half your games and you're struggling to qualify. Whereas you go back to CSK and you probably know how it's going to be run. You know that MS Dhoni is going to be operating in a certain way, having been captain for such a long time. Obviously, not this year, but having done so for consistently in the past. And you've had a very consistent coach in Stephen Fleming as well, and that's huge in terms of them being able to hit the ground running in tournaments.
Yeah, for sure. Dan, we're going to take a really quick break. Then we're going to come back. We want to talk about the Chepauk Stadium and the impact of luck, and maybe try and quantify that a little bit in this discussion. And then if we've got time, we'll do some questions as well.